Welcome back to the Stretch Game. This is Stone Jordan, and I hope your week is going well. If you hear some noise in the background, that's my wife next door in our home gym crushing it. It's one of the things that she does in order to stay effective. And that's what we're really talking about right now. We're talking about effectiveness, and we're looking at different icons from our time and analyzing them. And after last week's show, it was on Steve Jobs, I had a comment that I thought was interesting. A guy said he didn't think Steve Jobs was effective because he didn't have a very good family life. And I think this is where confusion comes in. If you look at the definition of effectiveness, effectiveness is amoral, meaning it's not good or bad. Effectiveness means that whatever you set out to do, you do well, you produce, and do it to a high degree. So some of the worst people in history were still very effective. So as we go through these icons, we're picking that specific thing, we're digging into their lives, and we're seeing, okay, what was the one thing that made them most effective? And then I'm giving tools and strategies so you can apply that one thing to your own life and really do it with great power. So that's what we're going to be doing this week. We're talking about Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan, my favorite athlete of all time. He's the GOAT when it comes to basketball. If you're outside the US, greatest player to ever play in the NBA, basketball here in America. And I used to love watching him in the 90s with my dad. We'd pull up our recliners, watch Scotty, Michael, and later Dennis just dominate the competition. So we're going to look at the number one thing that made Michael effective and how we can apply that to our own lives. Stay tuned. So in the late 80s, early 90s, Michael Jordan and the Bulls faced their biggest rivalry, and that was against the Detroit Pistons. And this was the bad boys Detroit Pistons team. They were kind of the last holdover of the 80s, really hard-nosed, hand-checking, beat-em-up kind of basketball. And so whenever the Bulls would meet the Pistons, who were the best team in their conference, it would be in the conference finals, and that winner of that team would go on to play for the championship. And so the Pistons developed something that became known of in a book called the Jordan Rules. And this was the rule that every player that was on the floor would foul Michael Jordan anytime he drove to the basket and would foul him hard. And if every single player saved all their fouls for Michael Jordan and didn't worry about the rest of the team, then they could literally beat him out of the game. And so you see this happening for one series. They get to the conference finals and the Pistons win. 2 times it happens. 3 times it happens. And I've seen a few interviews with Jordan with this, and he saw the Pistons as trying to attack him and trying to hurt him. And it really gave him a hatred for that Pistons team, with really the exception of Joe Dumars. But he saw the rest of them as trying to hurt him. And that gave him this competitive drive, this hatred for them, that he got into the gym. He started working out harder than ever. And you can clearly see a difference between pre-Pistons Michael Jordan and post-Pistons Michael Jordan. He gained a bunch of weight. He gained a bunch of muscle. He really became a much more forceful and dominant player on offense. And they ended up sweeping the Pistons after losing to them 3 times. And the Pistons, in this classic move, left the court without ever saying goodbye to the Bulls, even before time ran out, which you're not supposed to do. So that's really the first story. The second story is Michael Jordan with the Dream Team. And the Dream Team was the first big NBA showing, the first professional showing in basketball in the Olympics. And some would argue that this was the best team ever assembled in history of any sport. And you had players like Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, Charles Barkley, Patrick Ewing, Karl Malone, John Stockton. I mean, just amazing, amazing basketball players. And Magic Johnson recalls from that time that Jordan, when they weren't on the court, he had to win at everything. Okay, he had to win at basketball, But whether you were playing cards or whether you were golfing, or Magic Johnson even said if you were playing tiddlywinks, it didn't matter. Michael Jordan had to beat you. He had to crush you. He had to be better than you. And then the third story I want to tell comes to be known as the flu game. It's whenever Jordan and the Bulls played the Jazz for their 5th championship. And it became known as the flu game because Marv Albert said Michael Jordan is suffering from flu-like symptoms at the start of the game. Now, some speculate a hangover, some speculate food poisoning. Okay, so Michael Jordan was in his hotel room with a few of his friends, and they ordered a pizza. And so that pizza came, and his trainer, Tim Grover, says it was delivered by 5 men. And so Michael Jordan ends up getting sick the next day. And Michael Jordan never says this publicly, but teammates close to him say that Michael Jordan told them that it was the Utah Jazz that were trying to poison him. Now, I don't know if it was the Utah Jazz that were trying to poison him, and Jordan really can't know, I would assume, that the Utah Jazz were trying to poison him. But it created a fury within him that if they're going to physically try to harm me, then I am going to crush them. So he kind of tricked his mind to believe that, and he really just had this hatred for the idea that they would try to do this to him, and he was going to destroy them. He had to be better than them. And that game came to be known as the flu game because he played an amazing game, and every time the whistle blew where they would walk off the court, people, Scottie Pippen, Tony Kukoc, had to carry him off the court. So I said all that to say this. You might think that what makes Michael Jordan so effective is his practicing harder than he played games. Or you might think what made him most effective was the fact that he made the players around him better. But I think those stem from their sub-outcomes of the main outcome that made him effective, and that is Michael Jordan had the most insane competitive drive of anyone I've ever known. And I'm trying not to be critical of these icons. I will say that in Michael Jordan's speech, Hall of Fame speech, whenever he speaks, it's really interesting because this is 15, 20 years after he's played the game. And the speech was a little awkward because at times he would point people out in the audience that he had played against, and he would make known that he was still better than those players, or that he crushed those players, that he dominated those players. And it still seemed to me that he had something he had to prove, that he was better than them and that he could crush them. So I do believe that's the thing that made him most effective. And so how do we apply that idea to our own lives? Well, we don't want to hate people, obviously. And I think in this situation, when you're talking about being effective, you're not talking about good and bad. You're really talking about what's better and best, meaning that, okay, having a competitive drive is great. Wanting to crush somebody or really having a hatred towards them, not so great. And so I really had to kind of search my heart, and as a Christian, search the scripture, honestly, to decide what I really thought of this. And see, I think there's really two ways to compete with people. I think the first way that you compete with people is out of hatred, that you want to be better than them, that you want to crush them. I think on the other extreme side, there's competing with somebody out of adoration, meaning that you love them or love something about them and you want to be like them, and so you compete with them. And so for our purposes, how we can apply this to our lives is really competing with that person that has something that you really adore or admire. And so how do you do that? Well, we use the term called role modeling. If you look at somebody who maybe there's something in your life that you want to accomplish, you find somebody who's been there before you. And that's really a secret to leapfrogging in terms of learning a new skill, because anything that you want to accomplish in life, anything that you want to get done, chances are there is somebody that has done that exact same thing before you. And so if you role model them, if you do the things that they've done, you're going to get the same results that they have gotten. So this is how you do that. You find that person that has been there before, and that might take some time depending upon how specific or narrow what it is you're trying to do is. Then you look at that one thing, you determine what that one thing is that they're really doing perfectly, and you study their life. You study it, you dig into it until you come up with 5 things, okay? 5 things that they have mastered in order to do this one thing that you want, that you admire so well. Then, whenever you determine what those 5 things are, you set up a timetable. Depending upon how big the goal is, depending upon the intensity of the task, you set up a timetable for each of those 5 things to master those yourself. When you master those things, you become like the person that you're modeling. If you do the same thing as the person you're modeling, you're going to get the same results. So you can still have that competitive drive, but you can do it from a place of adoration, and you can be like the people that you admire. I hope you found this helpful, and just remember, whatever you do this week, my friend, do 2 things with it. Be both purposeful and productive. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you next time. Did you like this video? Would you like to make it a part of your daily life? If so, go to thestretchgame.com and download the blueprint. There you'll really get the meat of what was discussed today, because I throw a lot of content at you all at once. But more importantly, you will get your 7-day challenge. Now, this is the part that makes you a doer, not just a hearer. It allows you to really apply what you've learned to your life and be able to grow, be able to discover deeper purpose and master higher productivity. Also, if you'd like to know what it means to be and become a Christian, you can click Faith, and it will take you through a course where you can learn just that. Take care, my friends.